Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so we finally have deep dive for Captain Britain and she does look quite interesting. Now I do have plenty of worries about that, but again, we do need to take a look at every angle regarding the champion, and obviously, as always, this by no means is some sort of final conclusion of whether the champion is going to be great or not, because this is just very initial time to kind of review it. There's still going to be CCP videos. There's always a question of how she actually flows in the game, how she feels in the game, and how convenient she is to actually use in, harder game modes. All that being said, there is quite a lot we can figure out from this deep dive. And we can start with the fact that she's going to have access to quite a lot of buffs, fury, cruelty, and prowess, and also access to several different debuffs. She's going to be one of the very few mutant champions that has access to slow, which is quite interesting. Also weakness and I believe exhaustion debuffs by a variety of the means, but that also can work both ways. There are frequently circumstances when the buff gain or debuff infliction on an opponent can either be limited, disturbed, or flat out disadvantageous. And that also means that Captain Britain will walk into the same rakes that Cosmic Ghost Rider often does. If you can't have a full control of your special attacks at times, then you use them, or if there are any nodes that will mitigate your acquisition of buffs, or that will, get rid of your debuffs, it can be quite tricky to use her. However, let's break her down first and then kind of go into more deep analysis. Now, special attacks have 8,800 critical rating. That means that special attacks are almost guaranteed crits, and they will hit quite hard, but base critical rate is 0. That means you will hardly ever crit. Now, base critical rate is 0 does not mean that you cannot crit, because most of us run like precision masteries or could potentially have synergies, but it means that at her base she pretty much will almost never crit. Now, that can be useful against certain nodes, obviously, and typically it's the tech class that kind of benefits from it the most, but it kind of loses its meaning if you have to use special attacks that will crit, and obviously then they would fall in the trouble that your regular crits would often do. Now, when Captain Britain is struck by a critical hit or is hit in her block by a critical hit, 80% chance to inflict exhaustion, reducing critical damage rating by 500 for 10 seconds, max tax 4. So this is purely defensive ability to make her kind of like tankier, but on top of that, she will be inflicting debuffs quite a lot against many champions, especially with higher crit rates, and that could result in some very interesting interactions, and kind of look forward to trying them out. Also, for each promise effect on Captain Britain, her defensive ability accuracy is increased by 10%, and basic attacks deal energy damage instead of physical. It's also worth noting that she gains prowess effects whenever debuffs are purified by her own abilities or opponent's abilities, and that means that, again, there will be some very interesting interactions against high tenacity nodes or champions like Kingpin, Mallman, so on and so forth. So there could be some very exciting stuff lying in there. Now, obviously, we have the exhaustion debuffs. Also, her level 1s and level 3s do give her energize, which means you will have easier access to special attacks, which are vital to her kit. It's about 16 seconds, I believe, and 30% energize, so that's, quite neat there. Also, she starts every fight in her psionic mode, I believe, and when she does, your base attacks have burst energy damage, which is kind of meant to offset for not critting, I believe, and your abilities kind of shift. In your psionic mode, you can inflict many debuffs on the opponent. Slow by doing second medium attack, I think exhaustion by first light attack, and weakness on heavy attacks. Every time you activate a special attack, you switch on or off your psionic mode. Now, in theory, you don't want to spend much time out of your psionic mode at all. However, you have to switch them, because every time you activate psionic mode or deactivate it, you purify all the debuffs on opponent and then gain corresponding buffs on yourself, which is kind of like the main core mechanic. The champion revolves around inflicting debuffs on opponent, taking them away, gaining buffs, then pausing those buffs and stacking them up. And whilst in psionic mode, you also have increased physical resistance, I believe. And the purification method is here. So whenever Psionic mode is activated or deactivated, you will purify exhaustion, slow, and weakness debuffs, and you gain corresponding buffs that are listed down here. So cruelty for exhaustions, unstoppable buff for slows, and weakness for furies. And you can get to quite a few of these, I believe, especially if you do want to ramp up for a very, very kind of like long time. So she's definitely also a ramp up character, which is kind of like one of the first worries, because her ramp up is quite long. And in majority of the cases, you do not necessarily want to have super long ramp up. Kind of automatically kind of means that you will not necessarily want to use her for Alliance Quest, Alliance War, and, you know, most of the quest fights if you have better options. She's a champion that you would use if she's the one that kind of best fits in certain circumstances. For instance, champion that gains a lot of buffs, inflicts debuffs, or needs prowess access, or perhaps specifically mutant with slow debuff or something of the sort. Whenever a debuff is purified and the opponent gains an indefinite passive prowess, increasing special attack damage by 10%, I do not know where that caps. So there could be potentially some very insane videos coming out in the future with her having like 99 prowesses and stupid, crazy special attack damage. But again, that would take a very, very long ramp up. Now, what else can we figure out from these? The crazy thing that I kind of mentioned before could also be that she could gain a load of prowesses against specific opponents, like typically skills who tend to purify a lot of debuffs, or whenever there's tenacity node, or maybe against masochism. So there will be some very interesting interactions with the character. However, in most cases, I'm going to showcase later, well, this is a special to her. As I mentioned before, her specials are all but guaranteed crits, and they can do decent damage. They definitely can, but there is quite significant ramp up to them. But in every single video, I kind of notice that the timers are very short, which is a very legitimate worry for me, where we can see that every time there is something flashy happening, you have to have everything you go your way pretty much perfectly. And again, not to mention the fact that you need to be able to have full freedom on your combos. You need to be able to inflict debuffs freely without them getting purified to kind of have like a full rotation. You need to be able to gain buffs freely. And then you need to be able to use your special attacks in whatever manner you want. Those are the biggest problems Cosmic Ghost Rider has, and you know the main reason why Hercules is typically so much easier to use, or so many people use Hercules, is because Hercules don't have those restrictions nowhere near in the same degree. And that is a genuine worry for a champion that seems to be a ramp-up champion, seems to need pretty much the perfect setup conditions to perform at her best, and without too much of additional utility. Like, she has no immunities. Yes, there is that slow, but that's pretty much it. Weakness and exhaustion debuffs in themselves don't really do all that much. And I'm not sure how needed she is going to be. I'm sure there will be some fun things to do with her. She does look quite exciting. I just don't see a single reason why any roster would absolutely must have that character. Now, this ability I do like, that the signature ability, that whenever debuff is purified, you gain Bulwark passive, and you could potentially make your Captain Britain be really, really tanky with having like max block proficiency and having every single blocked hit do 0 damage in certain matchups, which again would lead to some very interesting interactions, and is likely, again, the only thing that maybe would force anybody to use exclusively her, or what would make her the best counter for something. Because I really do fail to see why you absolutely must have this champion, aside from, you know, you want to have a bit of fun. Because that ramp up, I'm not gonna lie, did look quite slow, and I'm sure there's gonna be damage, I'm sure there's gonna be payoff. I'm just absolutely not sure it's worth the effort, like with several other champions. And that might sound like a harsh critique, but again, that's why this channel exists here. I do like to look at the both sides. There is some interesting potential. There will be some very interesting interactions with the champion. But as of right now, I just don't see a great reason to specifically pick her out of a line of champions. Right, let's take a look at synergies, and unfortunately most of the synergies are fairly kind of Now, you do have synergy with Psionic, where both of the champions can gain a degeneration debuff whenever you crit. That's neat. It can act, sometimes degeneration might be specifically required for some conditions, or just access to another debuff. Thus, Despair Mastery can come into play and things like that. But for the most part, it's nothing game-breaking, especially considering she's rarely going to crit outside the special attacks. Now, it's good to be lucky. An unknown champion, Domino and Longshot, where you have a chance to gain a precision buff for 7 seconds, increasing critical rating by 14%. That's kind of neat. It's not too bad. It's win more situation with Domino for the most part. And now we have Understanding Evil with Thing and Colossus. All non-villain champions gain 10% attack rating, 5% physical resistance, 5% energy resistance against villains only. Again, it's nice. It's not a game groundbreaking synergy. It's just kind of good, nice, neat to have thing. And now we have one with Night Rusher, which is probably going to be the most important synergy for Captain Britain. Extend the Psionic mode debuff duration by 20%. All of those debuffs originally last 10 seconds, and then they're paused for like 5 seconds, I believe, whenever you use special attacks, or that was the heavy attacks that pause them, and special attacks pause your actual buffs. And then Night Rusher's synergy is quite useless. Honestly, Night Rusher's damage over time effects is not how Night Rusher does damage. Night Rusher does damage by, Furies and big crits and stuff like that. So it's quite useless for Night Rusher for most part. So for Captain Britain, this probably is going to be most important synergy, because aside from the fact that in order to use her well, you would have to have like pretty much perfect, Realm of Legends type of fight where either opponent cooperates with you very well and throws all the special attacks quickly, or you don't have to worry about level 3 at all, and you need to be able to gain all the buffs, you need to be able to inflict all the buffs, and you need to be able to shoot the special attacks in what order, whenever you want them. So that immediately creates a ton of situations where you would not want to use a champion. On top of her obviously not having the immunities, but also any node that messes with power, it's it. You can't do your rotation. And then any nodes that mess with buffs, debuffs will make it significantly harder. And you need to balance that for the idea for what. Like with Cosmic Ghost Rider, it's worth doing so often, even if it's not the best option, because of the sheer amount of damage you can inflict in the fight. And he can get through a lot of things quite quickly. With this champion, there is much, much longer ramp up. From what I saw, likely less damage, or significantly less damage for most part. And less utility as well, because Cosmic Ghost Rider at least have that, Fate Seal and Power Lock abilities. He has better power gain abilities. He has some immunities. He has ability to bypass miss, and, several other things that can actually make him a great option for a fight. So I'm curious as to how she's going to turn out. I'm not saying she's not going to be great. I'm not going to say any of those things. I will say, however, that I definitely need to see much more of this champion before I'd be kind of ready to say that she looks good, or I think she's good. At the moment, I do have quite a lot of doubts there. All that being said, keep in mind, March champions are subject to balance program, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning video. March champions are subject to balance program. So however she exists right now is not how she's going to be 6 months down the line, so in September. So we're only going to see the final version of this champion in September. And as long as balancing program is in play, I cannot advise or recommend anybody to, open cabs for any champion, even if it looked great, or grind arena, hardcore and things like that. So I do advise everybody to exercise caution with that, because if you really like her, 6 months down the line, she might not be the same champion, and the things that you liked about her might not be at school anymore. And likewise, if she seems underwhelming right now, 6 months down the line, she might be buffed up. So who knows what's going to happen with that. I really dislike that balancing program. Either way, let me know what you guys think, and I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information